unfurling from Fats Domino's left hand. Bill Haley stumbled upon it, Little Richard preached it, and Chuck Berry defined it. Rock and roll spread from the Deep South and shook up the USA. It twitched Elvis's hips, possessed Jerry Lee Lewis, and inspired Buddy Holly. But in the late 50s, it would be repackaged as pop.
It was like apple pie and rock and roll. It was all right.
And twisted into a craze.
We're exploiting our sexuality while being fully dressed.
It would be refined by girl groups.
We had sex appeal.
Reimagined by Motown.
I said, man, this is a hit. I knew it was a hit.
And soundtrack the West Coast dream. What was once crazy was getting smart and suburban. Rock and roll was spreading across America and being reshaped in the big cities of Philadelphia, New York, Detroit, and LA. By 1959, rock and roll's originators were missing in action. Private Elvis Presley was in the army in Germany. Jerry Lee Lewis was disgraced for marrying his 13-year-old cousin. And Little Richard had turned to the Lord. Hope lay in the hands of a new generation. On a bitter winter night, just before 1 in the morning, Buddy Holly left Mason City Airport on the next leg of the Winter Dance Party tour. 5 minutes later, ground control lost radio contact.
3 young singers who soared to the heights of show business on the current rock and roll craze were killed today in the crash of a light plane in an Iowa snow flurry. The singers were identified as Richie Valens, 17, Buddy Holly, 22, and J.P. Richardson, known professionally as the Big Bopper.
I'll be all right. I'll be all right.
Buddy Holly had set out on tour reluctantly. He faced legal problems and needed money, having recently split with his band, The Crickets.
The night Buddy got killed, it was a terrible feeling. And it made me wish I'd have been there, because I think maybe I could have talked him out of getting on a plane at 1 o'clock in the morning in a snowstorm. So that's just a little guilt for not being there, you know.
He was a good friend. He was a friend of mine. The very few people you meet in this business that are friends, you know, that remain your friends.
You don't meet many Buddy Hollies anymore. I'm one of the greatest people in the world. I really thought a lot of that kid. Anytime you lose a talent like that, everything suffers.
The pioneers were absent, and without them, rock and roll was set to become something very different.
Boss with the big hot sauce, and ladies and gentlemen, when you go hang out with the Gator with the heater, where do you want to go when you're going to rock and roll with the big boss with the big hot sauce? Where are you going to go?
Philadelphia, the unlikely home for rock and roll's translation by television. Television ownership exploded in America from 9% of homes in 1950 to 87% by the end of the decade. In Philadelphia's newly built suburbia, teens were keen to tune in to rock and roll. But TV also had to please Mum and Dad. A local show found the winning formula.
Welcome to American Bandstand. Once again, this is Dick Clark with 90 minutes of some fun and frolic we think you'll enjoy.
I think parents generally saw the American Bandstand show, partly because of who hosted it, Dick Clark, as okay.
He was what America was looking for to make our music acceptable, because he was acceptable.
Okay, the song is by Fats Domino. It's fast. If you'll take that side, you folks take the middle. Here's the big beat.
The big beat keep you rocking in your seat.
From 1957, American Bandstand was beamed from this tiny Philadelphia studio across the United States.
Clap your hands.
From 3:30 to 5 o'clock in the afternoon, it goes nationwide from New York City to Los Angeles, California. And when Dick Clark plays a record, the whole country hears it.
All right, we're ready for mic check.
The kids would all line up coming home from school trying to get in there, because everybody would just have their face seen on TV. And some of those kids became famous by being dancers on the show.
Come on, gang, let's swing and swing. The big beat make you act this way.
But if you were the camera, you're shooting us now, and we would get this close to the cameras. You just stay still with the camera, and we would be right up against the lens.
But the boys were worse than the girls, I have to say that. The girl would be like this, and as soon as he saw the red light, he'd go. There would be his face, the boy.
Clap your hand and stomp your feet.
The American Bandstand show, it was like holding a mirror up to the teenagers of America. They were on the show. They were the dancers. It was their music, and now they saw themselves.
Dick Clark was very strict about our dances. He only preferred us to do the slow dance, the jitterbug, and the cha-cha. And if you went on a weekend to a dance and there were some black kids dancing their dances, we would bring it to bandstand, and Dick Clark would not allow us to do it because it just wasn't clean enough.
There wasn't a lot of, bumping and twerking. It was kids dancing in acceptable ways. It was like apple pie and rock and roll. It was all right.
They say the years twixt 12 and 20.
Bandstand regular Pat Boone had kept parents happy with safe covers of rock and roll since the mid-50s. In 1959, he was married with 4 daughters, a 25-year-old shaking hands with Eisenhower and putting his English degree to good use.
It was the #1 nonfiction bestseller for 2 years, called Twixt 12 and 20. I wrote about things that were of interest to teens, and that's why I wrote what's on the flyleaf here. I'd like to talk with you about the whole list of challenges you meet as a teenager: altered relations with parents and friends, dating, going steady, petting, earning money, planning a future, getting an education, developing spiritually. I think the better we understand what makes our wheels turn during these years, the more we can make of them and the more we can enjoy them. Now, let's look at them together.
The music business did not want to be dependent upon a genius. They wanted to go back to the 50s and cookie cut. If they like the way Elvis looks, we'll get a guy who looks like Elvis and we'll do an Elvis song.
In Philadelphia, the original mavericks of rock and roll were being replaced. Promoters packaged local teens as wholesome heartthrobs.
The one and only Bobby Rydell.
You
everything had a kind of like a class, kind of smooth sound to it, you know, where Chuck Berry was, you know, and ours was like kind of like, if you want to put it into a rock and roll genre, I would say Wild One, you know, was probably my best attempt at rock and roll. It was a great record. It had a nice beat. You could dance to it, and the kids loved it. And it became my first million seller. But lyrically, come on. I mean, we're not talking, you know, Gershwin here.
Fabian Forte was another of Philadelphia's teen idols.
Oh, hi there. You know, so many wonderful things have happened to me in a short space of time, thanks to you.
He was spotted by his manager at just 14 years old, sitting outside on his doorstep.
And I guess he saw something in my face, my being, that he'd like that look for the rock and roll business.
Fabian's Dreamboat features were the perfect raw materials. He was greased, groomed, and marketed as the ultimate teen idol.
In the beginning, it was like puppets. I was like a puppet. In the press, Fabian. Who is Fabian? Fabian is coming. What's a Fabian? I mean, they did a fantastic job. I was a fantasy boyfriend. And this is what that bullshit was all about.
When I look into your eyes, I wanna leave. I can't conceal that you make me feel like a tiger. Ooh, like a tiger. Ooh, just to see you smile really drives me. I wanna growl. Wow.
The girls screamed for Fabe, but the critics screamed at him to stop.
Critics would say things like a rebel without a clue. That was my favorite one.
Like a tiger. Ooh, like a tiger.
I don't know. I've blocked a lot of it out. Some of it was really hurtful.
I wanna growl. Wow.
In spite of critics, Fabian recorded 7 albums in 3 years, had 3 gold records, and found fame as a film star. But his manager's conduct led him to quit the rock and roll business.
He was making advances on me, and I'd wake up in the middle of the night and he tried to be on me, so I sent him to the hospital. I went to my guardian and said, I want out. What's it going to cost? And I bought out my contract and never recorded again.
Bolstered by American Bandstand, Philadelphia's cartel of local labels sold rock and roll to Middle America as pop. In 1960, emerging from the whitewash, came one black phenomenon.
If you are ready, I gotta tell you about the dance sensation called... What do you want to do, Chubby? What do you say you want to do?
Come on, baby.
Let me see you shake your... Ooh.
Take me by my little hand and go like this.
Former chicken plucker Ernest Evans was rechristened Chubby Checker in tribute to Fats Domino, and he started a craze on American Bandstand.
We brought something along that this type of music didn't have before, because rock and roll did not have a dance. They were swinging to Elvis, they were swinging to Chuck Berry, they were swinging to Jerry Lee and Little Richard and Fats Domino, and then the twist came along, and the kids had their own dance. I'm looking at the girl's looking at me, and we're exploiting our sexuality while being fully dressed.
They wanted to be more sexy than the other one. I mean, you know, you had to really move and get down.
I don't think the twist was that sexy. It was a safe sex.
I mean, this and this is not this and this.
How could it be sexy? You know, when you're about 5, 6, 7 feet apart, you know, this was sexy. When you hold the girl and you hold her in your arms and you dip a little bit and you kiss, you know, maybe on the neck, you know. little something in the ear.
The twist was the first solo dance craze. It was catchy and clean and got adults dancing to rock and roll for the first time.
The twist, when it first came out, I mean, every head state of every country was learning how to twist. You know, Saudi Arabia, Italy, it was big.
The Queen of England was trying to learn how to do the twist. I made that up, but I bet she was.
It's still spreading. It's still here. How far has the telephone gone? How far has the electric light gone? I fall into that category.
Twisting time is here.
Philadelphia tamed and domesticated rock and roll. It had America transfixed with television, mooning over teen idols, and got the whole world twisting. In 1960, there were few rock and roll originals, but one man stood out from the crowd.
Dum 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 dee doo ah. Ooh yeah yeah yeah.
I asked Elvis, I said, Elvis, if you had to pick and choose one of your favorite singers, who would it be? And he thought about it. He thought about it for a second. He said, Roy Orbison.
Only the lonely.
Just days before Elvis recorded Are You Lonesome Tonight, Roy cut Only the Lonely in the same Nashville studio.
Only the lonely.
He turned teen heartbreak into pure tragedy.
Roy came from a little town called Wink in West Texas. Have you ever been to West Texas? West Texas will influence you. It's wide open spaces, miles and miles and miles.
They're gone forever.
Roy was physically not a movie star handsome. That was totally anti to everything that was going, the Frankie Avalons and so on, you know, Fabians, the Pretty Boys. Of course, they couldn't sing like Roy. There was more to Roy than teen angst.
I was all right for a while. I could smile for a while.
I had suggested changes and even made changes, some major, some minor, in every song we had done until we got to Crying. He came in and he sang Crying for me, just the guitar.
That I'd been crying over you, crying over you.
I said, wow, there's only one thing wrong with it, Roy. He said, what? It's not out yet. And he said, you don't want to change anything? I said, no, sir. And that's as perfect a song as I've ever heard. He didn't jump around and run around and do handstands and cartwheels. He just did it with that voice. I still miss him.
Back on the East Coast, rock and roll was also finding new voices in the Big Apple.
Why do fools fall in love? Why do birds sing so gay? And love is my way to break the day. Why do they fall in love?
Girls had been the subject matter, not the stars in rock and roll's first flush. But in the late 50s, inspired by Frankie Lyman's genderless doo-wop falsetto, New York girls began forming groups of their own.
Well, back then,
The public schools opened up at night for the teenagers from 7 to 11. Sometimes they had dances and sometimes the boys played basketball, but there was always a group of guys that would stand off in a corner and sing. All the girls, they dress up fancy and go and just listen to them. When I started to think in terms of how I wanted to present, I was impressed with the male singers.
Doo-wop harmonies prompted 13-year-old Arlene Smith to start her own group, the Chantels.
The first show was right here at the Apollo. And, you know, when you're wearing all these crinolines and your little legs are hanging out, my knees started to tremble because I'm thinking in my head as I'm singing, oh, they don't like us. They're not saying anything. Nobody's doing anything. It was so quiet. And then they clapped. They were like, whoa, you know. There was nobody singing anything like that. And of course, being an adolescent, you had a lot of feelings. Your sexual stuff is trying to surface. You don't know who you are. You still taking orders from parents. You still have curfews. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of things going into that intensity. We were innovators, you know. We opened up the possibility, and that's really all you need. Then you have a whole bunch of people coming through.
In downtown Manhattan, the Brill Building had long been home to Tin Pan Alley's music publishers and songwriters. But across the road, at 1650 Broadway, a new school of Jewish songsmiths started penning hits for black girl groups.
It attracted young teenage writers for the teenage market. I brought my girlfriend Carole King up with Jerry Goffin, and then Barry Mann and Cynthia Weil, and Ellie Greenwich and Jeff Barry. And we had little cubicles. We would write from 10 in the morning till 5 in the afternoon, 5 days a week. I was 18. I think Carol was about 17. It was the first time that teenage writers were writing for teenage audiences.
Tonight you're mine completely. You give your love so sweetly. Tonight the light of love is in your eyes. But will you love me tomorrow?
In the autumn of 1960, Jerry Goffin and Carole King had just one night to write a new hit for East Coast girl group the Shirelles. Their song gave rock and roll a female voice.
We were the very first black female vocal group to have a #1 record.
I'd like to know outside of your love.
Jerry Goffin wrote the lyrics. Carol didn't write the lyrics, she wrote the music.
I like that, yeah, but it's got to be harder, you know. When we write the lyric to it, it'll be different, you know what I mean?
And it's a very much a young woman's or any woman's attitude towards having sex.
I never thought of it in those ways at all, you know. I still had the mind of like a young person, you know. I wasn't thinking in terms of, you know, will you still respect me in the morning?
The fear of a woman, will you come back? Is this the one night only? Will you love me tomorrow? I thought it was a groundbreaker.
New York writers brought fresh female perspective and a new sophistication to rock and roll. In the studio, veterans Jerry Leiber and Mike Stoller, who wrote Hound Dog, also expanded the sound.
I started playing this figure. It was sort of, you know, Borodin or Rimsky-Korsakov. Anyway, Jerry heard what I was playing. He said, "Oh, that sounds like violins." I said, "Hey, why not? Let's try it."
There go my baby, moving on down the line.
Leiber and Stoller brought orchestral innovation to a standard R&B song written by Drifters frontman Benny King.
We had violins, we had timpanis, we had trumpets, we had tenor saxophones. We had the whole gamut in that one Atlantic studio. I wasn't aware of the fact that they were using instruments that had never been used on R&B songs before.
Atlantic Records boss Jerry Wexler was a little skeptical about the experimentations on There Goes My Baby.
Jerry was eating lunch at his desk, a tuna fish sandwich, and we played him the new record. He went ballistic.
He said, "I hate this thing. Where the hell did you find this? You got kettle drums and that."
The tuna fish was splattered over the wall. He said, "You're flushing our money down the toilet. What is it? It sounds like 3 stations are playing at the same time." But eventually they released it on the back of something else and became #1 R&B, #1 pop.
Everybody then decided they're going to go strings and kettle drums and cellos and all these great instruments on their records.
There is a rose in Spanish Harlem.
Leiber and Stoller's widescreen production inspired one ambitious kid in LA.
We sent him a ticket to come to New York, and he kind of lived in our office.
It only comes up when the moon is on the run and all the stars are gleaming.
Phil Spector co-wrote Benny King's first solo hit, Spanish Harlem, with Leiber and Stoller. It was an irresistible taste of pop production and power.
How to describe him? Unpleasant, a little nasty, you know. Phil's ambition was to rule the world.
Spector imagined productions of Wagnerian proportions and used girl groups as his means to an end.
He would always say, "These are my records. These are not your records. You know, you're just like one of the band members, the horn player or whatever."
The way he walks down the street, that's the way he shuffles his feet. High up his head high when he goes walking by. He's my guy.
He's a Rebel was a #1 hit for Spector, although credited to the Crystals, seen lip-syncing here. The voices on the record belonged to Darlene Love and the Blossoms.
I knew at the time when I got ready to record that song that I was recording it for another group. I thought I sounded good and the record was good, but I didn't think a record like that was going to sell. But then when it was a hit, then I wanted everybody to know it was me.
After the success of He's a Rebel, Darlene Love signed with Phil Spector.
Every evening when the sun goes down.
She presumed it would be her name on their next recording, He's Sure the Boy I Love.
I was driving home one day, and I heard the record come on the radio as the Crystals. Not only was I mad, I was shocked. How How can somebody do that to you? What I didn't realize at the time, that Phil was trying to become a star too. He really wasn't interested in making his artists bigger stars. It was about making a name for himself.
Spector called his records Symphonies for the Kids. And in 1963, he struck gold with a trio of dancing girls from New York's exclusive Peppermint Lounge.
We had sex appeal, and no other girl group had the sex appeal that we had. When I saw girl groups, I didn't want to be anything like them. We went the other route. All the girls were wearing their big flare dresses, and, you know, I said, no, we gotta wear tight dresses, slits up the side so we can turn and shake, and hair up to here, and eyes out to there.
The Ronettes brought that missing ingredient to Spector's Wall of Sound production.
They had to fly me to California to make Be My Baby, which I thought was scary. They have a booth for me, and all these musicians, Hal Blaine, Earl Palmer, 2 drummers, all these people are playing behind me. So I get in my little booth, and boom, dum, boom, bum, boom, 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 bum, na 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 na, dun, dun, na 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 na, bum. The night we met, I knew bam!
Be My Baby saw teen America fall in love with rock and roll's first bad girls. It was Spector's love letter to the girl he'd marry 5 years later and hide away in a Hollywood mansion.
The first couple of months after I was married, he'd take me to the studio just to, you know, pacify me. But when I figured I wasn't making any records, it was like taking candy from a baby, because he knew I loved it. And it was like, here, I'll give you a little bit of the candy. Now I'm taking it back. All of it.
By the way, where'd you meet him?
They wore boots. They wore black, they wore white blouses, they wore black vests or black leather jackets. They were tough girls.
Leader of the pack.
They were the girls who were gonna pull your earrings out if you got in a fight with them.
Down, down.
The Shangri-Las were a rare exception to the mostly black girl groups and took the bad girl image to new heights of moody melodrama.
They were vulnerable. They had that veneer of toughness with that vulnerability, pure neediness in the voice of this terrific-looking young woman. They gave us, as teenagers, another view of how a woman could behave.
Producer Shadow Morton carefully scripted his heroine's heartache.
He saw the whole thing. It was a story. It was a play.
Oh no. Oh no. Oh no, 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 no. Remember, walking in the sand. Remember,
He created these little teenage dramas. They were soap operas for kids.
Girl groups were born on the East Coast and gave rock and roll a sassy female voice. Meanwhile, in Detroit, one black entrepreneur was shaping the raw materials of rock and roll into a production line.
One of the unique things about Detroit was the factories. So that means that the people, no matter where you arrived in the North, seemed like you ended up coming to Detroit because that's where the jobs were.
By the 1950s, Detroit was the beating heart of America's automobile industry. Its population had soared to almost 2 million as Southern blacks flocked to a city that oozed potential for advancement.
The whole black middle class has expanded. We get our black elected officials are coming into play. All these blacks are beginning to get a certain amount of power. And all of this is inspirational.
Berry Gordy Jr. was a talented songwriter from a business family. He'd worked the line for $86 a week, and, like Phil Spector, he wanted to turn rock and roll into mass production.
Working in the factories gave him a lot of ideas because of the entrepreneurial zeal that he possessed, and then recognizing all his energy and talent around him and how you can bring it all together in an assembly line fashion based upon his work experience at Ford Motor Company, and then, boop, there it is, the company comes into existence.
Let me take you back to the very beginning, ladies and gentlemen. Originally on the Anna label, a fellow by the name of Barrett Strong. This was the first hit for Berry Gordy.
In 1959, Gordy recorded Money at a house in West Grand Boulevard. He called it Hitsville, USA.
The best things in life are free, but you can give them to the birds and bees. I need fun. That's what I want.
I was just 14 years old. I was broke. I was a young guy, wanted to help my parents. My father was a hard-working man. This man worked every day of his life at a rubber factory. I just need some money right now to help my parents get a nice house and help my father get out of the factory.
That's what I want. That's what I want.
The rest for money came up. And Robert Bateman was the engineer. He says, Barry, come here, I want you to hear what he's doing. Sounds great. Barry comes and says, yeah, I like that. I like that. Let's cut it. Yeah, it was great. It was rocking. I was in there. I said, man, this is a hit. I knew it was a hit.
Money don't get everything, is true. But what it don't get, I can't use. I need fun.
It was his first hit in that studio. I guess he was looking for the same thing I was looking for, money. That record helped him get some money to advance himself.
Gordy fueled his hit factory with R&B and took Detroit's moniker for his record label. In 1961, 5 girls from the Inkster suburb gave him his first Billboard #1.
It brings back a lot of old memories because we were only 16 years old.
Who played the drums for us on Please, Mr. Postman?
Marvin, I think.
Marvin Gaye?
I think so.
Was that Marvin Gaye? I believe it was Marvin Gaye. I think he played the drums on Please, Mr. Postman, if I'm not mistaken.
Please, Mr. Postman was the first record I promoted for Motown Records. The interesting thing about that song was all the kids knew one line: deliver the letter, the sooner the better. So when I met Berry Gordy, I was talking to him, I says, it's interesting about that song, Berry, that all the kids know that one line. And he said, Russ, Remember these words. That's the hook in that song. It reaches out and grabs them.
I think Please Mr. Postman set the stage.
Well, Please Mr. Postman started it all for everybody.
Yes.
For the Temptations, the
that's right.
Supremes, and all like that. It started the ball rolling.
Please Mr. Postman topped the charts at a time when the civil rights movement was gaining momentum in America's segregated South. But Gordy was more interested in popularity than protest.
Berry Gordy made music for the masses. He didn't care about whether they were white, black, or polka dot. He just made, music that he thought would sell. His favorite word was commercial.
Barry was open. He had big ears. So he was interested in all these different dynamics and how to begin to appeal to each one of those audiences out there and make something that could be marketable and purchasable across the globe.
Gordy rolled out the records like Model T Fords. Motown's black-owned business reimagined rock and roll and presented the new aspirational face of black music, the sound of young America. Meanwhile, on the West Coast, rock and roll was finding a place in the sun. A bunch of aspiring amateurs from Tacoma stumbled upon a soundtrack for America's emerging West Coast lifestyle.
My partner and I, Bob Bogle, we bought 2 guitars in a pawn shop in 1958. He had an album called Hi-Fi in Focus by Chet Atkins, and it had a song in there called Walk, Don't Run. And he played it fingerstyle, jazzy. We couldn't do that. We just learned how to play, So we had to try to do it in our own style, which we did. The record came out, I think, sometime in July, which was a good time, summertime, beach time. But for an instrumental, we got to number 2 and stayed there for about 3 months.
In 1960, the Venture's DIY approach on Walk, Don't Run inadvertently created a new rock and roll genre.
When we first started with the Walk, Don't Run, there was no such thing as surf music.
The Ventures, I don't think were aware of being a surf band. They were just an instrumental band, a really good one. We all went to the school auditorium on Friday and Saturday nights to see these spectacular surfing movies. There was no narration or anything, so we used the Ventures as background music for the surfing movies. They became a surf band, unbeknownst to them.
It was about a lifestyle, freedom, liberation. These people lived at the beach. They smoked some sort of mysterious substance. They gathered around a fire like tribal people that you read in Lord of the Flies. And for sport, they went in on a board and surfed the waves. It was free power.
Instrumental rock and roll and California culture birthed the guitar shaman who defined the surf sound.
First of all, Dick Dale played like this, backwards. He actually brought in that double picking style, like. Well, the excitement of watching someone on a big wave, on a board, going through that curl, the waves breaking over his head, and he has to duck down, and oh no, he's wiped out, and he shoots out through the foam, and he's okay, and it's just exciting, you know, and there's all kinds of suspense, and the music was like going right along with it.
This glistening West Coast utopia was co-opted by Hollywood, burnt onto celluloid, and projected into the minds of young America.
Disneyland is just opening up. There's the wonderful world of Disney on television, and these images of California and the lovely bright sunshine are saturating TV, and surf culture was happening right under the nose of Hollywood.
The Gidget is the one for me.
And that movie, Gidget, really had probably more impact than anything. And that really is what brought surfing into the mainstream consciousness.
This is the story of Gidget, a cuddling, befuddling teen who set out one summer morning on the beach at Malibu to find herself a man of her own, and found 7.
Gidget's success spawned a wave of bubblegum beach flicks in the early 60s.
What's going on with Gidget, Beach Blanket Bingo? Those films are actually quite, I guess what you'd call sort of clean teen pics. The parents aren't there, but they're not doing anything their parents wouldn't want them to do.
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
2 girls for every boy.
If you lived in New York and you saw those Gidget movies, you wanted to go surfing too. Life was about a surfboard, life was about a bikini, life was about doing the frug. There's no tall buildings, there's no ugliness, there's just sun.
It was all going to go Southern California. Car culture ocean, good-looking women, 2 to 1, come out here, have some fun. And they came. They came by the millions and millions and millions.
Surf City was the teenage American dream. And 5 beach bum school kids turned the fantasy into pristine California pop.
Hey, let's go for a ride with the Beach Boys.
Well, I'm not bragging, babe, so don't put me down. But I've got the fastest set of wheels in.
The Beach Boys sang about hot rods, girls, and surfing, and combined rock and roll rhythms with barbershop vocals.
Brian took a music class in high school, and he started listening to the 4 Freshmen and doing vocal arrangements.
We'll remember always graduation day.
Carl and I both got guitars around the same time. I was 10 years old, Carl was around 12. Brian kind of liked the sound of those electric guitars, so we started playing with him, and he incorporated that, like surf guitar, instrumental sound in with his 4 Freshmen vocals. That was the first time, I think, those types of vocal harmonies were used in rock and roll.
The Beach Boys took high school harmonies, mixed them with a Chuck Berry classic, and in 1963 wrote America's surf anthem.
The record Surfing USA was originally a record by Chuck Berry called Sweet Little 16. It was on his album Chuck Berry's on Top, which we loved.
They're really rocking in Boston and Pittsburgh, PA.
Brian just adapted that song to put the words to Surfing USA. They both versions named all the cities and everything, so we thought that would be clever.
If everybody had an ocean across the USA, then everybody'd be surfing.
Chuck Berry wasn't really happy with that version of his song because, first of all, I believe that his name wasn't on the record.
You'll catch him surfing outside Ventura County.
I know it was eventually resolved, but I believe Chuck was pissed about that, rightfully so. I remember sitting down next to him in a donut shop in Boston, next to the Jazz Workshop, and I introduced myself and told him who I was and everything, and he didn't look up from his donut or say a word. He just walked out.
Outside, outside, Pacific Palisades. Inside, outside, San Onofre and Inside, outside, Redondo Beach, LA. Inside, outside, all over the whole. Inside, outside, Hawaii.
I think the rock and roll music from the South and the Midwest, it kind of worked its way west somehow. And when the surf-influenced bands started playing that style of music, it turned into its own genre. And I think that's where rock and roll met the West Coast. That's where it met the ocean.
By 1963, rock and roll had spread so far it was in the sea. The Beach Boys, Motown, Phil Spector, and Roy Orbison had only begun their musical journeys. But teens were going steady, and most of American pop now seemed prematurely old.
I love you. No use to pretend.
When that's all the fare that you have, you know, you'll eat shit muffins and say they're good, you know, if that's all you got, you know.
In January 1964, Bobby Vinton was at #1 crooning this song, which had previously topped the charts way back in 1945.
There, I've said it again. I tried to.
But in February, aliens from across the ocean replaced Bobby at the top of the charts and reignited the kids in America.
Well, shake it up, baby, now. Shake it up, baby. Twist and shout. Twist and shout. Come on, come on, come on, come on, baby, now.
The Beatles. Tough group, man. Well, they stirred up a stink, didn't they?
So good, looks so good.
I knew a bunch of us in trouble when they come out.
Just like I knew you would, like I knew you would. Well, shake it up.
I was at a friend of mine's office. He showed me this picture of the Beatles. He said, "This is the new thing. It's coming out of London. They're going to be a smash." I said, "Who?"
The best things in life are free, but you can keep them for the birds and bees. Now give me more.
Then when I heard them sing, I said, "Man, these guys are, they look one way and they sing another way." I said, "They're great."
That's what I want. Hey, oh yes, wait a minute, Mr. Postman.
I can tell you what impact they had on the girls,
Yes.
period. Oh, the girls went crazy over the Beatles.
Right.
The Beatles landed in America long-haired, at ease, unique, and self-assured.
They think your haircuts are un-American.
Well, it was very observant of them, because we aren't American, actually.
Oh yeah, I'll tell you something.
They covered Motown and R&B, but it was their string of self-penned hits that transformed rock and roll into Beatlemania.
Its most extreme form, of course, is a kind of out-of-control teenage excitement, a kind of group worship of idols who are different, non-conforming, and who have a lot of musical appeal and a lot of sex appeal. And, of course, there are 4 of them, which makes them 4 times better than any other teenage idol we've had in the past.
We needed that shouting on. I mean, because all you could hear on the radio was Bobby this, Bobby that, Bobby who, and Bobby, it was all Bobby, you know, singing songs that was a long way to be in rock and roll. And it kind of got me disgusted when the Beatles come out after the end of the Bobbies.
Did it hurt us? Yeah, absolutely. You know, because every radio station in the world was playing everybody who was coming from Britain at that time.
Suited and booted, British bands arrived en masse. Rock and roll was suddenly tribal. It was about being young, cheeky, and in a gang.
Herman's Hermits, the Beatles, Dave Clark 5, Manfred Mann. All of a sudden, very few American artists are getting the play.
I said the joint was rocking.
In June 1964, with Chuck Berry records in hand, the Rolling Stones went to the source and recorded at Chess Records.
They came and recorded in Chicago, and that blew me away. It was the first long-haired guys that was really around. Was the first guy that saw drink whiskey out of a bottle, you know.
It sounds so sweet. I had to take me a chance.
And I drove Brian Jones back to the hotel, and people were screaming homo because he had the long hair. In Chicago, that was like weird. I remember at a red light. Sometimes they'd be sloppy, they'd be horrible, stoned, not showing up. Some nights they'd become one.
When I want to enjoy some black music, I just turn the Stones on because they do us better than most people do us. Then he starts singing, I can't get his big lips out like some black guy, I can't get no satisfaction. And I tried, and I tried. And all he's doing is a black guy.
They discovered the blues and chess and early rock, really just, they were like the, I think they discovered it stronger than American kids.
The Stones weren't the only Brits to remind America of rock and roll's roots. Five Geordies, the Animals, growled the tale of a Storyville brothel and looked south to where it all began.
There was a house in New Orleans. They called the rising sun. And it's been the ruin of many poor boys. And God, I know I'm one.
Well, the guys who originally said, I'm gonna rock you, baby, rock you all night long, they weren't talking about a child in a crib. I'm gonna rock you, baby, rock you. No, it was sexuality. It was sex.
Gambling man down in New Orleans.
Their best music, their culture was lying around. We put our hands into the collective garbage bin in America and pulled out this thing called rock and roll. I mean, we were preaching it. We were preaching rock and roll. It became our new religion in a way.
In New Orleans, they call the rising sun.
Rock and roll's shape had shifted, and its attitude was reborn. Suddenly, the kids were screaming again.
In God, I know I'm one.
The morals are dangerous, that's all I know. And you can't get away from it, you can't clean it up because it's dirty to begin with.
And for those who gave it life, rock and roll will never die.
I think the boy days are gone, but the man is still here. And will continue to charge on. A whole lot of shaking going on.
That's what you got. Yeah. Now let's go one time. Shake it, baby, shake it. Shake it, baby, shake it. Ooh, shake it, baby. Come on, baby.